Welcome to another episode of Ask the Zamboni Experts. I'm your host, Doug Peters, and our guest, Jeff Campol. He is a recreation facilities consultant and principal of Campol Consulting Group. Welcome, Jeff. Thanks for coming aboard.
Great. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Great. Hey, Jeff, could you share with us and our listeners a little bit about your family and where you grew up?
I grew up in Toronto and lived there until I moved to South Florida in 1991. And I've been in Florida ever since. I'm coming up on 30 years down in South Florida, but I'm still a Canadian at heart.
I'm sure you appreciate the Florida sun as opposed to the snow that in the cold of Toronto, though, eh?
I do, and I appreciate the A. I do, but there's things that you miss. I still have family, and I try and go back once a year or twice a year, but definitely not in the winter. I usually go back in the spring or in the fall. I love the fall up there, so I'm there.
Great. I'm a little bit like that myself, having left Minnesota almost 34 years ago now, and there are things I miss about it, but when it's 75 and sunny and it's well below zero back there, I'm not going to be complaining. Can you tell our listeners a bit about your career and how your path took you to Florida?
Well, if I told you how I got to Florida, it wouldn't be that exciting, other than I'll just say I was kind of like the Beverly Hillbillies. I'd had enough of Toronto and Canada for a while, and I was very familiar with Florida, having family that had places down here. So we just decided that we would try it for a year. In a previous life, I was an educator. I taught high school. I taught physical education, special education, and geography. And took a break, took a leave of absence, and rented my home and took my wife, 2 kids, and a dog, and moved down here with the hopes of sticking around. And like I said, 30 years later, we're still here. But I really didn't come down with a plan. So again, the way I came down is probably not the best way to do it, but things seem to have worked out for the most part. So yeah, I've been here since late 91, actually Christmas Day of 91.
When you came down to Florida, did you get into your career as a teacher, or did you do something else when you first got down there?
When I first got down here, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I know that sounds kind of, whatever, but yeah, I really didn't know. And I'd been here on vacation many times, but living down here was much different than actually just coming down for a week or two. So I got my bearings, and we ended up in the city of Coral Springs, which I was told was a great place to raise a family, and great schools and parks, and that was our first decision, and was a very good decision. And then I just looked for what interested me, and I had a few contacts here. I had a relative that had moved down here a year prior. He put me in touch with an attorney who I'm still very good friends with, and he's still my attorney to this day, 30 years later. And I did some real estate investments and did that for a couple of years. But really, I was still kind of fumbling around for what I wanted to do down here. And not to lead you into the next question, but at the same time, the Florida Panthers, the NHL awarded Florida a franchise in '93. And that was right around the time that I was getting itchy to do something else. And that's how I kind of fell into what I fell into for the last 20 plus years.
Being that you're from Canada and that hockey is such a big part of the fabric of the community up there, were you a hockey player? And if not, what sports were you into when you're growing up?
And again, I'd like to say, especially back then, everybody was into hockey, and they still are now. I played hockey, but at 5'8" and 150 pounds, I quickly realized that, yeah. So I enjoyed playing hockey. I played travel hockey, and I played club hockey at the university, but that was the extent of it. And then when I moved down here, I still, I would get on the ice down here when I could. But yeah, I mean, hockey was up there. It's a staple, and it doesn't really matter who you are, where you are, whether it's hockey or whether it's just skating or recreation. It's still it's unbelievable how popular it still is up there.
Canada lost a great person in Walter Gretzky, and I was fortunate enough to meet him, as well as been fortunate enough to meet Wayne. Who is your biggest sports hero, and have you had the opportunity to meet them?
Yeah, again, it's very sad and ironic. Wayne was involved with the project that I was in back in the early 90s. It got me involved in the rink industry down here through a partner of mine. And so I met Wayne a few times, and again, just a great guy, and only lent his name, which is what I liked about him. He wouldn't just uh, put his name out there on just about anything. So he was very particular in what he wanted to be involved with. And so we were thrilled to have him involved down here. And again, growing up in Toronto, I tell this story and everybody chuckles, but the last time the Leafs won the Stanley Cup was in 1967, and I was 13. I won't tell you how old I was, but I was just a teenager. And my dad said, "Do I want to go to the parade?" And silly Jeff said, "No, I'll wait till next year." And that was in 1967. And I'm still waiting and hoping, honestly, that there will be a parade at some point, and I'll still be here to be able to go do it. But yeah, so it's been a while, but hockey is in my blood, and especially when I got involved in it in the projects down here, it really became a different animal down here as opposed to just being a fan. But yeah, I still watch games. I'm still very much involved, and have lots of great colleagues in the sport as well.
Well, usually my compadre from our Canadian plant is on, and I'd be busting his chops right about now. Where one of my last questions that I've got, and we'll get to that now, is, are you still chanting 1967? You know,
No, honestly, it's hard to believe. I mean, I can only imagine what it was like in Chicago for over 100 years when the Cubs never won, and in Boston. Um, But to think that a franchise like this, the number one and number two franchise in the NHL for 100 years, I mean, hasn't been able to put anything together to even get close other than in 1993 is just a statement in what are we going to call it? Mediocrity. I'd like to think that they're on their way now. I mean, they're headed in the right direction, but still, there's a long way to go. But yeah, I really hope I'll be able to see one.
yeah, this year I think it's structured so that a Canadian team is going to at least make the conference finals the way that they're having to do things. And I think what's surprising to me, more so than 1967 with the Leafs, is 1993 with a Canadian team winning a Stanley Cup. And I'll joke with our Canadians about that. I said, last year, the reason why the NHL did the Edmonton bubble was so that the Stanley Cup could be awarded in Canada to not to a Canadian team, obviously, but
I'm sorry, that was a joke? That was a joke?
It was an attempt at humor, Jeff.
Okay.
But that's why I don't get paid for being a comedian.
Right. Understood. There's so much I could say, but I won't. But yeah, I'm hoping that I'm hoping, especially in this strange season, just like last season, that everything will go off as per. And yeah, the way the setup is this year, it's different than any other year. So it'll be interesting to see how everything plays out by July 8th, which will be strange in itself.
That it will. So you moved down to Florida, and you didn't take up or continue your teaching career. How did you get involved with the Panthers organization, and were you involved with the design and build of the first practice facility for the Panthers?
This will be a long sentence, so I'll apologize in advance. Just cut me off whenever you need. Yeah, in 1993, the Panthers established themselves down here as an NHL franchise with Mr. Huizinga at the helm, and there were very few ice arenas. In fact, in where we are in Broward County or South Florida, which is Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach, there were only two ice facilities. One was a single sheet ice chalet, it was called Sunrise Ice Arena, for those that are listening, and the other one was called Gold Coast Ice Arena. Both were, I'll just say, aged in 1990, and one of them is still standing right now. So again, I was looking and did a little investigating and said, how come there isn't a new facility? And how come somebody smarter than me didn't get involved and do something? And every time I came up with I couldn't come up with an answer for it. And so finally I decided, you know what, I'm going to look into this. And as I looked into this, it became more and more something. It became something of passion for me. And I was living in the city of Coral Springs, and at the same time, the city of Coral Springs put out an RFP, a request for proposals, to develop a 180-acre parcel of land, a recreational park. And I had a consulting company, Can-Am, Canadian American Consulting Group, and I did some inquiries and put together a proposal to submit to the city. And lo and behold, I was one of 3 or 4 that were selected for it. And then the rest is history. And that was back in '93. And my idea was to design a twin ice skating facility, which now is after the fact. But at that point in Florida, they looked at me like I had 2 heads, because we were going to do this on the edge of the Everglades. And so when I went out and pitched the idea, it was a bit of a stretch for a lot of people, but the city seemed very involved. And where we were was a great community of about 120,000 people, but within a 5-mile radius of well over 2 million people. So it was just a great location, and it went from there.
So you left the cold only to get back into the cold. Was that a wise decision on your part to get involved with the ice rink?
Well, I had to go out and buy all new socks, because when I got down here, I threw away all my socks because I vowed I would never have to wear them again or use them again. And yeah, ultimately I had to go and get some old clothes and some new clothes, but it was definitely worthwhile. And I loved every minute of it. And I loved the idea of, being in a rink all day and, coming out almost any time of the year and it being beautiful outside. And it was a real melding of the two together, because as down here, forget hockey, forget anything like that, ice sports in general wouldn't be in the top 10 of most people's list down here. There's just so much to do outdoors. So it was a real struggle to get investors and get, other than a small handful of people that were either Canadians or people from the Northeast that were very familiar with hockey. It was it was a bit of a struggle, but it turned out to be just a very, very worthwhile experience.
What involvement did the Panthers have at all with the facility that was going up that you're involved with?
I'm sorry. At the time, the Panthers had no involvement. I started the project on a cocktail napkin in 1994, and we were able to get a design and construction and a building completed on November 21st of 96. November 21st of 96, we opened Incredible Ice, as it was known for the longest of time. And it was, like I said, the first designed twin ice skating facility in Florida. And it was very different than any other ice skating facility that you've seen. And even to this day, the partners that I had were architects from Toronto that were interested in getting involved in what they had called Wayne Gretzky's Iceland, as I go back to Wayne. And they had a format, they had a plan that they wanted to roll out with Wayne, numerous of these buildings around the country, and this was going to be the flagship. They were looking to do a similar project before we got involved together in Boca Raton, which is within 20 minutes of Coral Springs. And their deal, for whatever reason, with the city of Boca fell apart. And they came to me and we partnered together, and we built a beautiful facility, 2 ice surfaces and a lot more, and not a traditional ice rink as you'd see in probably just about anywhere. And so we were thrilled with the outcome. We opened it in November of 96, as I said, and the Panthers had just gone to the finals in June of 96 with their magical run, and everybody came out of the woodwork and everybody became a hockey fan. And so it was great timing for this building to open up. It was great for hockey at that time because the Panthers were playing in Miami, in the old Miami Arena, which was a bit of a barn, only had about 14,000 seats and wasn't in a great area. So it basically, all this came together, and we opened the building, as I said, and within 4 months, Mr. Huizinga, the owner of the Panthers at the time, and many other businesses, decided that he made an offer to us, and we decided to sell it to Mr. Huizinga and the Panthers. The other group that I brought in are still doing other facilities and big arenas from an architectural firm, Stadium Consultants International. And I stayed on, and in fact, I stayed on till 2016. So I was there for about 20 years, and it was just a great ride. The building, the Panthers took over early in '97, and I became an executive with the Panthers from '97 until 2016. And it was just, yeah, it was a great opportunity. And with the Panther brand, we really did a nice number on not just being an ice rink, but really being a branded facility with an NHL team, which at that point was still in the infancy stage, in its infancy stages.
Jeff, that's something that I want to branch off onto, is that the NHL teams, the Dallas Stars, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Arizona Coyotes, the Anaheim Ducks, some of these teams now have done that, and you were involved with get-togethers, sometimes formal or informal. I remember Let's Play Hockey show in Vegas. They used to try to get you guys together to talk about the ins and outs and how that worked running a practice facility for an NHL team. Can you expand a little bit on that for our listeners and us?
Well, and you led me right into what I was going to say, which was our facility from the get-go was quite successful, and we were part of that ice rink construction boom in the mid-90s, where, as you said, other NHL teams had similar ideas and similar ventures into the community ice rink business, especially in the Sun Belt where hockey was still growing. To your point, San Jose, LA, Anaheim, Phoenix, Dallas, the Lightning, and later on Nashville and St. Louis, as well as the Flyers, all had NHL team either ownership or involvement, and many of them became practice facilities, but these buildings became marketing tools for the team. And again, not being in Toronto or Montreal or in the Northeast where hockey is really ingrained and having to grow the game, these buildings open pretty much 365 a year, every day of the year, were great marketing tools and great facilities to be able to grow the game from the ground up. And when I say the game, I mean hockey primarily, but again, in our facility and in all of these new facilities that were built, and most of them were at least 2 sheets of ice in each building and some more, you needed to be a full service facility. You had to have ice sports and not just hockey. You needed to have a figure skating and curling and just about anything else that could be done on ice in order to be profitable, in order to be successful, and in order to have sustainability. So I think that, you know, I was lucky enough to be involved at the right time, as I said again. And to your point, a good friend, Mike O'Hearn, in Phoenix, had a small group of NHL facilities people that got together very randomly, and it turned into a group that had close to 15 to 20 people by the time I left in 2016, that we would get together annually for typically a day and a half to 2 days around the country. And it would be the best 2 days of the year for us, because we would share best practices, we would share financials, which is not done very much because people are very secretive of their business and don't want to share, especially in their own markets. And I can tell you that in those meetings and in those conferences, there was lots of fun, but there was lots of energy. And to this day, I speak to just about everybody in that group for help, for advice, and what are you doing now, and what's changed, and how is your business doing? And so it's interesting, and it was very different from a lot of the other rinks in the country, where the 2,500 to 3,000 rinks in the country, there's only a small group that would be owned by NHL teams or have that marquee with it. And we found that when we went to conferences, whether it was ISI or any of the other conferences that were held, when we would sit in some of the information sessions, they didn't really apply to us. And by that I mean that, you know, we weren't and this will come out wrong, so I apologize, we were more than what some people would think of as a mom and pop facility. We had departments, we were much larger, the expectations were much higher from the NHL team. So it was on us to make sure that we were absolutely doing as much as we can to drive revenues, to manage expenses, and really to do things a little differently. And so we formed this little group, or this little group was formed, and I was lucky enough to be involved in it. And it really, really helped a lot to really see what you were doing. And because we were in different parts of the country, it was interesting to see what Phoenix was doing or what they were doing in California versus what we were doing. And like I said before, we would usually host it at one of our buildings. So we would do a tour, we'd get an NHL game in at the same time, and we would spend a good 2 days in a conference room, going over information and sharing information, and it was great.
Jeff, what kind of challenges were you faced with in running an NHL practice facility? Not only just doing that, but having it in Florida. I've been around to some different facilities, was just recently at a new one where there was several wealthy people that contributed to the building. And how were you able to get that balance to where you had to get the revenue in, but still satisfy the needs of the team and its ownership?
It was a bit of a trick at the beginning. We had 2 sheets of ice, and with 2 sheets of ice that were pretty much fully booked 18 hours a day, it became a trick. I would say in the early stages, the team practiced at a new arena that was built about 8 miles away from our building in Sunrise, Florida, where they still play today. They moved out of Miami into a much bigger facility. And they used that facility for most of their practices. And when they did come over to our building, it was more, we were more a satellite. And it was far from ideal because, again, locker room situations, medical situations, they were far from ideal. And that led us to looking at another building. We were going to build a second facility, a second Incredible Ice in the city of Weston, which was right in between the big building, the arena, the Panthers Arena, and our building. And we were very close to having a deal done there, and something happened with the city and they decided against it. And that's when we decided to expand Incredible Ice in Coral Springs. We went back to the city, who we had a fabulous relationship with in a public-private partnership, and we had some more land available, and we added a third ice surface and a complete private training center for the team that we designed. I designed with the team, with the general manager, with the equipment staff, with the medical staff, so they had everything they wanted. And once we got the third sheet in, we were able to absolutely take care of the team for training camp, for rookie camp, for development camp, for all their practices, and it became their home. And we put all the bells and whistles into it. It was we expanded in 2008 and opened it in 2009. So that's 11 years ago from now, and it still lines up with some of the best in the NHL. It was 16,000 square feet. It had hockey operation offices. It had a gym. It had medical. It had hydrotherapy, conference room, just about everything for the players, and the players used it and loved it.
How does it feel to know that you're the trendsetter? I've been to numerous facilities and seen things that I saw at your facility when it was going up and after it had been opened. But how does it feel to know that you've created what everybody wanted to have as the bare minimum of their facility to look like?
Well, I would say that when we were looking to expand and when we were looking at it, again, I go back to the small group. I flew to Arizona. I flew to San Jose to see what they had, and Anaheim. And they all had hybrids of what we were trying to do. And we took the best of each of those facilities. I also took my general contractor who we had selected for the project and went to Toronto and did a road trip in Toronto, showed him some facilities, and actually went to the Maple Leafs new facility. It was just being finished as well, and really drilled down to everything in the FF&E and all the finishes, because again, the finishes for an NHL practice training center versus what you're building for a community rink are much different. So we really did a thorough job, and it really came out. It was really, we were really excited. And, you know, the team and the players especially, you know, you want to wow them. And when they walk in, you don't want them to say, well, how come you didn't do this or this isn't. And when they came in, without a doubt, everybody was thrilled to be in there. They spent an inordinate amount of time in there. And it became, and still does, for most of the NHL facilities like this, a recruiting tool. Players want to play in Florida, great weather, no state income tax, and then they would always parade all the players and just about anybody else to the practice facility because they'd ask. The agents would ask, the players would ask, and they'd show them, and they were suitably impressed. So again, if you go around now, as you know better than anybody, lots of the NHL facilities have new and or refurbished practice facilities for their NHL team. And in fact, they're doing the same for AHL teams as well.
Yeah, it's interesting with the Kraken coming on board in 2021-22 season. This coming fall, they'll be starting up. What they're doing, I see, and you know, I want to give you kudos, Jeff, because what I've seen in these facilities are things that I saw you guys do well before the other buildings have. The stadium seating in the TV room or the review room, whatever you want to call it, that was spectacular. That was as good as going to any movie theater. Having the therapy where you could be water, the cold water, hot water, all that stuff. The Lemieux practice facility up for the Penguins, a lot of the things that you guys did is patterned up there. And I think you can see it if you've seen some of the things that is going on with the Kraken in their practice facility. And I'm sure in their building that they're going to build in Palm Springs will feature some of these things. So, you know, you should give yourself a good pat on the back because a lot of the things that they want are things that you guys designed into your building.
And I would think that, you know, when we look back, you know, in the last 20 plus years, the whole industry has come a long way. I mean, I remember when I first got into this industry, and you've been in it a long time, it was really different than what it is now. You know, the work that I do now in facilities consulting is for, sometimes it's developers, sometimes it's for municipalities, sometimes it's for nonprofits. And, you know, the expectations of everybody now are definitely ramped up. The old barn that was just, you know, a sheet of ice where everybody would run in and run out is just not, you know, especially if you're a private developer or you're a municipality, you want something to be able to be a showcase. And again, it really depends on where in the country you are or where in North America you are. But when the business that I'm in now and the facilities and the projects that have reached out to me over the last few years are, I don't want to say typically, but mostly in what I'll call non-traditional, again, hockey or ice sports areas. And so they are looking for something to complement what they have with their Parks and Recreation department, or a developer is looking for something that will do something for the community and give back to the community. But again, be profitable. And that's the trick with these buildings is you know, being sustainable and keeping it busy year round, because as you know better than anybody, they are a bear to manage. And so yeah, the market itself has changed dramatically for the most part. And a lot of the older buildings now are either being retrofitted, renovated, torn down, and or being rebuilt. And it's very rare that you see just a single ice sheet building being built right now. Most are at least twin ice skating facilities with 2 sheets of ice. And as you know, there are many buildings around the country with 3, 4, 5, and even 6 sheets of ice, depending on where they are.
Yeah, to me, it's not really surprising that the growth is in non-traditional marketplaces because that's the least saturated for facilities. And it's also interesting you talk about the buildings and where they're at. And what's amazing to me, having been in this business for longer than 34 years with Zamboni, is that when that growth happened in the 90s, those buildings are now approaching 30 years old. And there's an organization out there called Black Bear, which is out taking a look at acquiring and have grown substantially with the amount of facilities that they've acquired. And I think that it's people who got into it, and both you and I are not as young as we were 30 years ago, and they're looking for an exit strategy, and maybe it's not there, and they've got somebody walks in and says, hey, I'll buy your building from you. Do you think there's going to be growth in that side of the marketplace as well, Jeff?
Well, I think that what you just said and who you just said, that's exactly what's happening. Again, a lot of people get into this business, I don't want to say for the wrong reasons, but maybe not for the right reasons. They could be hockey parents that have a small group of people that are really gung ho and have some financial wherewithal to be able to do something like this. And again, I've spoken to some of those people that are looking to get into it. And this is a very tough business to get into. It's not especially if you're going to do it right. It's a significant outlay of capital. It's labor intensive, and to do it right, you really need a professionally managed building. And a lot of these buildings, as you say, they aren't successful, and they're not successful because they don't really do their due diligence in the earliest stages of design and really seeing whether there is a market. Or they're only thinking of their daughter who's a figure skater or their son who's a hockey player when he's 7, 8, 9 years old. But in 10 years when he's gone, and then they're left with this large building that is a business that needs to run, and to your point, needs significant work, because the capex that goes on in these types of buildings is very substantial. Refrigeration system, dehumidification systems, rinks and boards, and everything's very expensive to repair, to keep up, and maintenance is a bear in these buildings. So yeah, I think that there are people out there that are always within the industry, and the industry is relatively small, looking for deals per se, or looking for businesses or buildings that could either be in trouble, or to your point, somebody wants out, and they'll go in and spend some dollars, refurbish, and turn the business around, or just put it into their portfolio.
Yeah, if people will allow me to give them advice when they're talking about building a rink, I usually ask, can I ask you, or can I offer you some advice? And there's easier ways to make money and harder ways to lose it than owning and operating an ice rink. And when they're trying to get a better slot because they want their kids skating at 7 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock at night, or they think their kid's the next Wayne Gretzky, or I'll go old school Peggy Fleming as a figure skater, that's not a good reason to build an ice rink. And it's great to have resources like yourself out there that can hopefully educate them, so that if they do decide to proceed, they're going down the right path.
And sadly, many of them don't do that. Many of them just go ahead and start building, and they either find during construction or at the end of construction, many of them turn into a bit of a problem. Although there are many successful buildings around the country, and again, well thought out, well planned out. But it really is, it's a calling. And if you're not a hands-on operator, if you have to bring in a management company, there's added costs to that. And then I found in the 20+ years that I was involved, and that's who I am. If it's got my name on it or my face beside it, then I'm going to be involved. And no, I didn't need to be there at 6 a.m. on a tournament weekend, but I wanted to be there to make sure that all my staff was there in position, ready to go. Most buildings aren't run like that. There's lots of them that aren't, and it's a travesty. But again, to run a really good building like this, it takes a good core of key staff. And I was lucky in the Incredible Ice building to have exactly what I just said, a very good core of key staff that was with me almost the same 20 years that I was there. And we had a strong staff, and they all bought into what we were doing. It was a culture that we created, and it worked. But as I say, jokingly, we were a family, and many times we were a dysfunctional family. But we would get in our conference room and air it out, and then go out to the public, and everybody would do their job, and we just had a ball doing it. We loved it, and like I said, it was a great ride, and we were, not to pat ourselves on the back, we were very successful, and it was just a pleasure to do it for all those years.
What challenges and or responsibilities did you have in helping to promote the NHL game in Florida, which wasn't a traditional ice market?
Oh, we, again, sitting on the executive board of the Panthers, I would be in weekly meetings, update meetings. I would be on all the retreats, and I would always be in the corner raising my hand, saying, I'm over here, and what can we do? And so again, being associated with the team, and depending on who was in control of marketing, who was in control of game presentation, etc., we would always be involved, whether it's in game, in between the periods, on TV, doing interviews, promoting our figure skaters in between the periods. So we had a great, and again, we kind of grew it because we were both at the beginning, we were kind of learning, and as a new franchise, they were learning. And we were really trying to be not just the ice rink in Coral Springs, but Incredible Ice, part of the Florida Panthers network. And we really ingrained ourselves, and we would really like get involved and want to be involved. And as we grew, we had many events at our building, and we promoted our building out in the marketplace all year long. Unfortunately, there were some lean years with the Panthers, and they would be finished April 4th or April 5th or April 6th, and there wouldn't be any playoffs. And from April until middle of September, it was a long dry zone for hockey within the community. And like I said, you're living in South Florida, where the weather is 70, 80 degrees all year long, and there's lots of other things to do. So we would work very hard to make sure that our building was just as busy in April, May, June, July, and August as it was in the traditional ice sports season of September through March. And when I'm talking to people, and as you know, I mean, it's easy to fill a building no matter how many, with 1 or 2 or 3 sheets of ice from October through March. It's much trickier to do it in the shoulder seasons and in the summer season, especially down here. But it took a lot of work and a lot of coordination. But again, we had a really good relationship and a very tight relationship with the Panthers, and that was a credit to them and a credit to my team and them including us in part of the picture.
Did the synergy between the team, did that help, or there were several years that the team didn't perform very well on the ice? Could that be something that also could ultimately hurt your building when you're trying to develop more people coming into it?
I would say no, because I really think that, the Panthers and the Panther brand, again, being in South Florida and having a lot of transplants from the Northeast and from Canada, I mean, they were looking for hockey and NHL hockey, and there is a good core of NHL hockey fans down here that are hockey fans and Panther fans now. And yes, there was a lot of years when they didn't have a lot to cheer for, but we were always associated with the team. And it wasn't a detriment, I would say. It gave us a lot more latitude than we would have had if we weren't. I mean, we started the Florida Junior Panthers travel hockey team that was, again, associated with the team. We had a lot of players in certain years that were older, so they had young kids that were in the Learn to Skate or the Learn to Play Hockey program, or in the youth league or travel league, so they would be in the building. We had coaches, many coaches that came through. And again, they would, because I had a very good relationship with them, they would come out, or they had kids, or they wanted to use it as the facility. And so there was a draw to the facility when they were in the building, and it was nice. And it really worked out for the most part. Again, having a team that's like San Jose that has pretty much always been in the playoffs. I mean, that's a huge boost. And also, looking back, it was a credit to ourselves that when the team wasn't doing well, we were still doing well, because we were a community-based facility. and we reached out to the community that we were within, and in the South Florida market, and we became a known entity. You know, being in that building for 20 plus years in a non-traditional market and really being involved in just about anything within the marketplace helped us immensely. But yeah, the team was definitely, I mean, I loved being associated with the team and all that it brought to us and the notoriety, good and bad, but good.
The team seems to be looking better, some talented players on it. How do you think that they're going to be looking going forward?
I think they've got a great core now, and they've made some changes once again. I mean, they've gone through many changes over the years. I want to say that while in my tenure, I think I went through 4 different ownership groups, which was trying. And back to your question before, it was a bit trying because each ownership group came in and had a different model or a different set of personnel. But I think the team's well positioned now. And to your point, back to the playoff format, it's going to be very interesting to see how this thing rolls out this year. So yeah, I think they're in the best shape that they've been for a long time.
Share with our listeners what you've been doing post your career with Incredible Ice and what you're involved in these days.
Since 2016, I started a small facilities consulting group having to deal with recreational facilities. And yeah, I'm involved in feasibility studies, market analysis, financial modeling, management, startup, and I've worked with, as we said before, private developers, municipalities, professional teams. Again, I'm not looking to be very big. I've got a small stable of people that work with me in different areas and have different areas of expertise and bring that to the table. And we don't want too many projects at once because we want to be able to deliver to whoever we're working for. I was working on a project in Palm Beach Gardens for almost 2 years to build a multi-sport facility that included ice, but also included gymnasium space, squash, just a very interesting building in Palm Beach Gardens, about 30 to 40 miles north of here, just north of West Palm Beach, and just a fabulous community. They are in fundraising mode right now, and we'll see where that goes. I've also have some other, I'm working with the Jacksonville Icemen in the East Coast Hockey League that are looking to renovate an existing building and add on. I'm helping them. So yeah, and I've got some other projects in the works as well. But I really like what I do right now, and honestly, I don't think I really want to go back and do the day-to-day managing as long as I can keep involved in the industry. And again, that goes back to me being involved and having, I'd like to say, really good contacts and a decent relationship over the last 20 to 25 years with people that I've dealt with, that I can call somebody up that I might not haven't spoke to for a while and get their ear and you know, hopefully do business with them. So I know what I know and I know what I don't know, and so I stay within my lane, but I think I can help. Like I said, I've done some work with municipalities and private developers, and just trying to get in early, like we said, so that we can find out better to spend 20 or 25 or $50,000 before you commit $20 million and find out that it's a no-no. So that's kind of where what I'm doing, and I love it.
Jeff, I think you spent a little bit of time in New York City. Do you want to talk about that? And did you enjoy your time when you're up there?
I was in New York City in the fall of 2016 through a winter of 2017, and I was assisting with an outdoor seasonal rink with a company that in Bryant Park, the company that was managing it. I was there, and again, it was fresh off my 20-year experience with Incredible Ice and the Panthers, so it was very different for me. But I love being in New York City, especially in the fall and winter. And it was really my entry into really looking into what I could do. Very, very busy in Bryant Park in Midtown Manhattan. It was just a fabulous venue, and they run every year, and I was happy to be involved. And from there, I moved on to the Palm Beach Gardens project. I was lucky to have another one come right down the pipe, and that kept me busy for a while. So yeah, I really enjoyed my stay in New York City.
Where do you see the future of either community rinks or NHL buildings headed as we navigate out of COVID and into whatever follows it?
That's a great question because, you know, in talking to architects that I've been working with, I think, you know, in designing new buildings, I think some of the COVID protocols that people are doing now and putting together will be part of the new buildings being built. Some buildings will be retrofitted, most won't be because of cost, and operators will find ways around it as they have already for the buildings that are open during COVID. And again, you know, many buildings are open depending on where you are in the country. Some buildings are still shut, some buildings are open, some buildings are partially open, and other buildings are wide open. So it's all over the place right now, but I think that there will be more time in the design phase looking at, you know, locker rooms, especially egress, entry points, looking at the types of buildings, public assembly areas. I think everybody's going to look at that, and not just only in the rink business, but just in recreation facilities in general, and schools, etc. Because this has been an unbelievable wake-up call for all of us. And, you know, it's been once in a lifetime, and hopefully it stays that way. But there's no reason to think that, you know, something like this couldn't happen again. And I think that everybody, well, I'm hoping that everybody will be much more prepared than we were for this one.
How do you see the health of the ice rink marketplace in Florida these days?
Again, going back to when I was involved with Incredible Ice in the mid 90s, you know, there weren't that many facilities in the state, but since then there have been numerous buildings that have gone up. There's a facility in Wesley Chapel that has 4 surfaces that's been open since January of 17. That has become the hub of hockey in Florida now. And again, being 30 minutes away from the Stanley Cup champions, and Tampa helps them as well. And again, having Tampa as a very competitive team in the NHL every season also helps their business. But there are other buildings that have been built around the state. Most, as far as I know, some have changed hands, but they're still being operated as ice rinks. So I think that there's probably room for a few more, depending on location and depending on, you know, proper market analysis, etc. Florida hockey has come a long way, and you know, I was looking at some earlier before we got on. I was looking at, in regards to that. I mean, I'm going back to when we opened. You know, we were the first facility to host USA Hockey National Championships in the state of Florida back in 2002, and again we did it in 2015 and 2017. Our facility was named Forbes magazine one of the top 10 best facilities in the country to go skating in the early 2000s. We introduced curling, and so some of these new buildings that are coming in again have to look at all those areas in order to be successful, in order to offer, you know, not just hockey and straight public skating and figure skating, but, you know, get more involved. I look at some of the names, you know, we've developed, and not just at our facility, but in the state of Florida. But in the mid 90s on, our facility, I mean, we have players in the NHL playing for the Flyers, Shane Gostisbehere, in Arizona, Jacob Chikrin, in Calgary, Chicago now, Connor Murphy, Sam Gagne, Riley Stillman, Tyson Berry. We've got lots of players that went on to play in the AHL. We had, I'm trying to think, you know, USA Hockey Development Team, USA Hockey World Junior Team, Hobie Baker finalists. We had the NHL Rookie of the Year finalist and Shane Gostisbehere. And all of these kids grew up in our building, either at the earliest levels or played there for a while. So again, hockey in Florida isn't the anomaly that it used to be, just like it isn't in California or even in Arizona. I mean, you look at Austin Matthews, who's arguably one of the top 2 or 3 players in the NHL right now, and he's from Phoenix. So hockey in our non-traditional states, and not just Florida, but all those other places, including Dallas, and now Nashville, is strong and will continue to be. The challenge is holding on to our players when they become bantam aged 14, 15, because again, the competition sometimes isn't here, and parents, if they really have gifted kids that are playing, or figure skaters, sometimes they have to leave, and whether it's to go to the Northeast, whether it's to go to Canada, whether it's to go to the Midwest, they feel like, and many times, I hate to say it's true, there's much more competition, many more games, and they can get their development can be much, can speed up considerably by going there. The same way that Florida and Texas and California gets the bulk of people that want to play football, tennis, golf, or soccer year round, where we have the facilities and the weather to, to make people. So, but we've done a good job in Florida growing players and growing skaters as well.
Yeah, it's something that I'm dealing with my nephew right now, whose son is a pretty talented hockey player. I got to watch him for the first time through the miracle of technology with YouTube, playing a game up in Minnesota, and I'm in California getting to watch him play. And I've tried to tell him, Leroy, who is a part-time resident in Florida, his son Travis, we had on as a guest before he passed away last fall. I'm a big believer in what Lee would say, is that if your kid is talented, they're going to find him or her, no matter where. And yes, you can chase the dream a little bit further, or maybe in a different way by going to a more traditional marketplace. But the names that you've rattled off, as well as the players that have come out of California, and having a D1 program now in Arizona, and I think that there will be a D1 program in California at some point in time. It's not what it was when you moved from Toronto down, where hockey was just not thought of in Florida. So, I think that your involvement certainly played a part in that, Mr. Gretzky and his name being involved down there. I mean, I go back, Phil Esposito getting involved with the Panthers certainly
Tampa,
Tampa had a lot to do with making a name for it. And just, it's amazing to me to see what it's done now, or how things are now versus what they were. And I think that if you look at that and say, look at how much you've been able to help grow the sport, what's it going to be like in another 25 or 30 years? So, kudos to you, your staff. Some of them have moved on to different things. And one of the guys that used to work for you, Jeff Remelius, is one of our distributors up in Michigan. And I think a lot of the skill set that he has to do with the training that he received down in your facility. So
it's funny that you say that. I was speaking to him yesterday out of the blue, and yeah, he moved on and he's turned it into a whole new business and is just thriving. And again, I speak to him, we speak to each other, having to do with equipment, having to do with where he's at, and following his kids in their hockey career. So yeah, I still have very good relationship with most, if not all, the people that we either worked with or still do in some capacity. And yeah, it's nice to see other people going on and staying within the industry and flourishing and able to help out wherever they are.
Well, I've asked you all the tough questions. Now we have to get into some of these, because I consider myself to be a foodie. I've been lucky enough that was able to dine with you on an occasion or two. And I remember an Italian restaurant that I think Luongo had maybe had some involvement, or a relative of his did, which was great food. But have you ever been blessed enough to be able to have White Castle as a meal?
When I was out in California the last time, I decided I'd better go. So I stood in line and went there, and I was suitably impressed. Suitably impressed.
That's got to be In-N-Out, because there's no White Castle restaurants in California. That's okay. Sorry. But you can get the freezer section ones. They're just not as good. But maybe we'll drag you up to Minneapolis, and we'll go at about 2 o'clock in the morning to a White Castle, so that you get the full experience, Chef.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be heading up to Minneapolis anytime soon. I was there once in May for the figure skating conference, and it was still snowing, and I decided that would probably be the last time that I go back to Minneapolis.
What would be your favorite food?
I love food. I would probably have to say pasta, and not one particular, but just pasta in general. So for sure.
And where would be your favorite place to travel to?
I haven't traveled enough. I've been to some lovely places. Of all the places I've ever traveled to that I'd like to go back and maybe go back, and I think you'll know the answer, is Hawaii. Um, I spend a little part of my day looking at it on YouTube every day on a live cam and going, yeah, I could go there again. But yeah, I really enjoyed my time in Hawaii and went to all the different islands and spent more than just a day or two each. So I really got a nice flavor for it and would love to go back there for an extended time.
Well, my offer is always open that when I'm over there and if I've got a spare room, that you're welcome to join us. It's my slice of heaven, and I got a couple weeks from now. I'm planning on headed over there. So.
Yeah. No, it's. I really enjoyed it there, and again, living in what some people, I'm living in a place that most people, as you are, come to vacation, especially this time of year, from November through April. People come here and spend all their time, and yet everybody's always looking to somewhere else to go. Whether it's from here they go to the Bahamas, from California they go to Hawaii. But yeah, I really enjoyed Hawaii and would hopefully like to get back there sooner rather than later.
I'm gonna just kind of bust your chops a little bit on this one. The favorite place for you to go in your hood for a blue light special, seeing as how you qualify for a senior discount like I do in most places.
I'm just going to take a pass on that because I don't really know what a senior blue light special is, but maybe you could send that information or some of your recommendations down to me. I still go out for dinner. I still don't go out for dinner until the lights come on, so it's still a little later. I don't go for the early bird special.
Jeff, how does one get a hold of you if they are in need of your services? Do you have a website? How is it that we can help you get your message out to people so that they don't make the mistakes that other people might have made?
Best thing to do is probably just contact me directly. You can go, my email address is jeff@campolconsultinggroup.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. My website is still under construction. But yeah, it's Jeff@Campol, and Campol is spelled C-A-M, P as in Peter, O-L, consultinggroup.com. And I'm looking forward to hopefully speaking to some people and helping some people and I there's a few more names that I'd like to be able to tell you who I'm working with right now, but I really don't want to at this point because I don't have the ability to say. But yeah, it's really exciting for me to be able to help private developers, like I said, and I'm also working with some industry powerhouses that are just looking for some help on the community rink side. So I'm offering my services and have been taken up. So I'm thrilled. And if there's anybody out there that needs some help, I'm more than willing to be able to join in.
Well, I can certainly vouch for your skill sets as well as your knowledge in the industry. And we want to thank you for joining us today. We want to thank everyone for listening in to another episode of Ask the Zamboni Experts podcast. Have a question for one of our experts or an idea for a future episode, please email your questions or request to info@zamboni.com. For more information and additional podcast episodes, please visit zamboni.com/podcast or search Ask the Zamboni Experts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. This is Doug Peters wishing you an iced day.